Well, yesterday, Australia's Chief Justice said our High Court was ashamed that one of its former judges, Dyson Heydon, had sexually harassed 6 women who worked for him as his associate. Now, these women were young high flyers, but one says she became so disillusioned by Dyson's harassment that she left the profession. And other women have also come forward, including a lawyer who says Heydon groped her under the table at a dinner. Now, Dyson Heydon denies that happened, denies sexual harassment, and says that any of his conduct gave offence. That result was inadvertent, unintended. And people close to him also complained that the High Court's independent inquiry that ruled that he had harassed these women didn't give him natural justice, didn't let him test the witnesses against him, and wasn't run by a trained lawyer. And still, complaints from 6 women. The Prime Minister wasn't going to run any defence at all to that, except to quibble about whether to take away Dyson Heydon's Order of Australia.
Allegations of this sort are obviously very disturbing and very concerning, and they're incredibly serious.
Should Dyson Heydon's companion of the Order of Australia be revoked?
It's not appropriate to presuppose those processes. That's not the way these things should be handled.
Now, the women are the main victims here, and we've invited them on the show to tell their stories, but there's one other person who feels hard done by Dyson Heydon. When Bill Shorten was Labor leader, he was dragged before the Royal Commission into Union Corruption was called by the then Abbott government and run by Heydon, who gave him a lecture as well.
What I'm concerned about more is your credibility as a witness.
Bill Shorten is now Shadow Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme and for Government Services. I spoke to him earlier. Bill Shorten, thank you so much for your time. The news with Dyson Heydon now, how does it make you feel after having been read a moral lecture from this same judge when you appeared before him at the Royal Commission into Trade Union Corruption?
Well, for a moment, parking how I feel about the Trade Union Royal Commission, I was surprised, shocked, but the more I stopped to think about it as the story broke last night, clearly I felt for the 6 women associates who've been mentioned and other lawyers. A High Court judge is, like, there is no higher in the legal system in Australia, and for these women to come forward and have their matter investigated, and for Chief Justice Kiefel to then apologise to these women, you know, that's gigantic. Also, seeing the Inquisitor-in-Chief, who gave lectures to not just me, but to lots of people caught up in that Royal Commission, sure. I thought, well, now it's all back onto you. But that's not the main game here, is it? The main game is this most remarkable revelation and the way that Chief Justice Kiefel's handled the matter. I mean, it's...
Look, I agree with you, except for this one problem I have, and I wonder what you think. Here, the High Court Chief Justice has essentially ruled that she finds him guilty. She's apologised, she's ashamed and all that. But this will be going to court almost certainly, at least for 3 of the women. Does that concern you that the Chief Justice, our top legal official, has really proclaimed essentially guilt or innocence in a case that's yet to go to court?
Well, I guess she's also the employer, and there are obligations. And I'm sure she wishes this whole thing hadn't come to be. I can't read her mind. But, you know, she's taken steps once notified, and it seems by the amount of reportage, there's been a lot of investigation and a lot of checking with a lot of people. So I don't know what the parties do after this. You're right, there could be court processes. The Commonwealth may just choose to try and resolve it. But I think Chief Justice was in a tremendously difficult position, but not one of her own making. And what does she do once people have come to her with complaints?
Oh, look, I'm not pretending it's easy. I agree. It's just you're caught either way. But it does raise very interesting legal issues, I think, depending on how far this case goes. You've called for Dyson Heydon, to be stripped of his Australian honours. Why is that?
Yeah. Because in the light of what the Chief Justice has said about the conduct, I wouldn't have thought that would render you suitable to have an AC. I mean, this isn't word against word in one situation, as important as it is to check those matters out. There's a pattern here, and it's not just an allegation. The Chief Justice has come forward publicly after I suspect I believe a very thorough investigation. So therefore, this isn't the standard bear pit of social media or he said, she said. This is a pattern of behaviour which, and when you look at the significance of the people involved, I suspect that Chief Justice Kiefel will have crossed all her T's and dotted all her I's, and I think for the women involved, this would not have been an easy process in the slightest. Just okay.
Not at all. Just finally, you want a royal commission into this overpayments scandal. The government had a plan, robo-debt, to match people's profile against a certain set of criteria, and if it looked like they'd been overpaid, send them a threatening letter, and of course that's now been judged to be unlawful, and the government's going to say sorry and pay people back. Why have a royal commission on top of that?
Well, without being pedantic, you said the matter was judged to be unlawful. What happened is that for 4 years the government raised in excess of 500,000 debts against nearly 500,000 Australians with no lawful authority. But this wasn't the finding of the court. The Commonwealth came when the matter finally went to court, and the Commonwealth agreed that it was unlawful. So the Commonwealth themselves have put their hand up in the court when it finally got to the federal court and said, we give up, this is unlawful. So the reason why we have a royal commission is the government won't tell us when they realised it was unlawful. They won't tell us why they never bothered to check whether or not this scheme of unjust enrichment, raising hundreds of millions of dollars against hundreds of thousands of our most vulnerable, they won't say who made the decision. They won't say why they didn't check, was it legal. They won't say were they running a deliberate litigation strategy of settling at the door of court whenever someone complained. So I do think that the only way we're going to get to the bottom of how this mistake could have occurred, how an unlawful scheme could be perpetuated for 4 years against Australian citizens, is a royal commission. In Parliament they stonewall us. The court actions are about compensation. But this government's hiding behind legal privilege, and we'll never find out unless we have a royal commission. How could you make an illegal decision hundreds of thousands of times, costing people millions of dollars and real hardship for a lot of people?